Hello, everyone. I am Storyteller. Thank you for visiting this peaceful place. I know you are looking for something soothing to help you fall asleep, and I am here to accompany you. If you enjoy, please give me a like and subscribe, and let me know where you are from. Thank you. Almost Angels. I dare you. Meryl couldn't resist a dare. She never could. She opened the car door and ran out into the cemetery. It was a night in a million. Not fog, but low clouds hovered around the gravestones. So satisfyingly spooky. There were no stars, but the overcast sky above was bright with moonlight. Meryl could see her way just fine, and hid behind a tall stone that read, Margaret Lesko, 1840 to 1913. A woman who died over 100 years ago, and her stone yet survived. Here I come, said Lucas. Meryl held her breath to keep from laughing and put her hand over her mouth. What she'd meant to do was jump out when Lucas ran past, throw her arms around his muscular shoulders, and wrestle him to the ground. Then they'd kiss. And then she heard his footsteps running across the grass. He called her name while headed in the wrong direction. She was going to wail, Lucas, in a horror story voice. But several male voices interrupted from somewhere, and she held it in. Who are you? No, no! A gunshot. Moonlight shined through the kitchen window onto her mother's table. A vase of dead flowers with a little card on a stick lost its color in the pale light. A pile of used tissues surrounded a box of Kleenex used to prop up her senior picture. Mom? She called out. No answer. Mom? She opened her mother's bedroom door. Both her parents were asleep in bed. She kissed her mother's cheek, still wet from tears. Mom stirred and smiled without waking. Meryl walked through the halls of the high school, looking for Lucas. Her friends were just up ahead. When the bell rang, everyone disappeared into the classrooms. Meryl drifted into first-hour social studies and sat at her desk. Sue Ann shivered as she walked past and put her jacket back on. The words imports and exports were written on the board. Lucas's seat was empty. Lucas's parents and siblings stood outside the hospital room. Meryl tried to see inside room 314A, but a team of medical personnel surrounded the bed. Machinery breathed and pulsed lights. Lucas? She called. No answer. She could have gone inside, but she didn't want to interrupt the doctors. I love you, Lucas, she whispered. Autumn, and the trees had turned. A mildly wild wind rustled through the colorful leaves, backdropped by a steel gray sky. Meryl strolled through Charlton Park, kicking the leaves on the ground. During the summer months, roses filled the gardens, and on Saturdays, brides, grooms, and their guests filled the park with ceremonies. Now, the roses were supplanted by burning bushes and mums. Some weddings were still performed in the park during this time of year, but not today. It was Thursday, and chilly, and no one else was here. Not even a dog walker. She walked to the playground and sat in Lucas's swing, the one he used when they came together. Here, they had slid down the slides and got silly dizzy on the old-fashioned merry-go-round. I dare you to slide head first. Lucas had taken her up on the dare, and she followed after him. Then they slid down the slide together in each other's arms. A police car drove slowly through the park, looking them over because they'd been making so much noise. It was only 8 o'clock, but dark settled early this time of year. The police station was downtown. Merrill walked past the desk clerks and the stairs where they kept the bodies waiting to be identified by their loved ones. She wouldn't think about that. She sat down in the chair in front of Detective Greta O'Neill's desk. The pictures of 4 men sat on top of paper files. Merrill shuddered. "That's them," she said. But there were only 3. Who is this 4th man? When Detective O'Neill left her seat, Merrill read the report. It seemed Lucas had interrupted the execution of the 4th man, who'd been able to run away before Merrill got there. The 4th man was under protection as a witness to this crime and others. He owed a great deal of money to an organization of criminals. There was a jewelry store on the corner, a few blocks away from the police station. Merrill looked through the window at the rings, the same window she and Lucas had looked through together. The diamond with the golden heart was gone. It had been a small diamond, a 1/4 carat maybe, but Lucas had asked which one was her favorite, and she'd told him she loved that one. Someone said Lucas had bought a ring. Had he? Where was it? She looked at her hand, surprised to see it on her finger. She didn't remember Lucas giving it to her. It belongs to her. She should have it. Who said that? Lucas's mother? Merrill always had the feeling Mrs. Kessler didn't like her. Lucas would have wanted her to have it. Yes, Mrs. Kessler's voice. They had slipped it onto her finger at the funeral home and buried her with the ring. She glanced over her clothes and found herself not wearing the clothes she died in, but the dress she'd worn for her senior pictures. The same dress she'd worn to her funeral. So confusing to be dead at first. All her friends were there. Everyone from the high school she knew and didn't know. Every one of her relatives. Poor grandma. She didn't understand. Her parents were so sad. And Lucas's parents. Merrill ran out from her hiding spot behind the stone toward the sound of the gun. Lucas lay as still as the grave markers surrounding him. Blood ran from his head to his face. The man holding the gun was surprised to see her running toward him at full speed, yelling for Lucas. Unafraid, he lowered the weapon and smirked, nearly laughing. What have we here? He hadn't expected her to jump at him the way she did, and it knocked him to the ground. As he fell, she wrested the gun from his hand and shot. After that, one of the other two men put their hands around her neck and choked her life away. As she faded, she saw a bright light open wide above her head, and the gunman rushed toward it. Before he got there, a shadow whisked him away. The light waited for her, but Meryl stayed behind with Lucas. The red and blue lights came too late for her, but not for him. She rode to the hospital in the ambulance. Meryl sat on Lucas's hospital bed with her arms around him. His mother sat in the chair closest to the bed. His father sat beside her, and his two younger brothers sat in the room's wide window seat. No one spoke as the machines whistled and pumped. There's little to no activity in the brain. He may never come out of the coma. He will never breathe on his own. Spend as much time as you like with him. You tell us when. Lucas opened his eyes and smiled when he saw Meryl. The machines set off alarms. A doctor came in and checked Lucas's vitals, then shook his head at the family. He disconnected all the machines and left the room so Lucas's family could say goodbye. Meryl cried, while his family suffered through the realization that all hope was lost. His mother was the last to leave the room. The worst was watching Lucas work out that he was dead. "I'm here," she whispered. A bright light opened wide above them as they held each other. "Shall we go?" Lucas asked of the light. "Do you think they'll let us stay together?" They kissed and decided to stay a little longer. "We can always come back to the hospital and jump up into someone else's light," they reasoned. "We shall see." After Lucas's funeral, he wore a suit instead of a hospital gown. They found they could revisit any place they'd already been, including the movie theater. Every night, they kissed their mothers on their cheeks as they slept. It was years later, in October, on the road beside the cemetery, long past dark. A pair of headlights came into view and headed their way. "I'm going to scream this time," said Meryl. "I dare you." "I will." When the car was close enough, Meryl and Lucas stepped in front of it. Meryl screamed. Tires squealed and screeched, and gravel flew as the car came near to losing control and then stopped. "Did you see that?" the driver screamed. "I saw it," the passenger screamed back. The ghosts of those murdered teenagers that haunt this road every year. I think I even got it on video. If you're all right, then let's go. There's no signal out here, and I can't wait to post this. Oil and water. The scrutiny of the gallery guard weighed on Spencer like a wet dressing gown. He'd felt watched since he pushed through the heavy doors into the guard's peacefully unvisited room. Spencer was tired from his unplanned journey and thought that the gallery of the unfamiliar town might offer sanctuary, a place where he could clear his head sufficiently to be able to plan his next move. He had ignored the guard, who lingered near a door-sized slab of a painting on the right wall of the gallery. He had turned immediately to the left wall and had been standing silently in front of the first painting, hung there for a couple of minutes, trying to think. He just needed to think. The painting was of a young artist sketching a large pig's head. The pig was dead in the profound way reserved for decapitated things, objectified by the disconnection, but somehow more of a head than ever in the absence of a body. The head suggested a hierarchy of death. Even a dead thing could be less dead than a pig with no head, or a head with no pig. Staring, Spencer became aware of the feeble beating of his heart. He needed to clear his head. Death was death, whatever the bristly head said. There were no less dead things. He was alive and still wanted to choose his own future. Still could, if he could only think of what to do. Conscious of the weight of his own tired meat, he shuffled away from the pig. Spencer's eyes scanned ahead of him as he crept along the left wall of the gallery, following the low metal barrier wire that kept visitors and paintings at arm's length. He sensed the guard watching him from his post next to a large, dark canvas on the right wall. He did not stop next to a huge oil of a group of idealized 19th century peasants. The most prominent figure, a rosy-cheeked girl, her delicate bare feet romantically invulnerable to the field's brutal stubble, was staring at him, as was the stern overseer who supervised the girl and her gleaning rabble. The eyes of the overseer and the gallery guard held Spencer in a pincer of disapproval. He kept walking and found relief in front of a benignly curving river, rolling past a grassed bank under skies of early autumn gray. Eyes were still on Spencer, glaring from their place on the right wall, cutting through his back like a barber surgeon. Spencer breathed, filling his pressured lungs, and held his ground in front of the painting of nothing. There were other footsteps in the gallery now, another body to share the guard's gaze and allow Spencer the space to think. The gleaning girl was not her. It didn't even look like her, except for the delicate bare feet, the last thing he'd seen as he left the bathroom. Bath softened and steaming, wet in the air. Her feet could never have survived the rough field. Footsteps moved around him now, softened by gallery etiquette. Spencer ignored them, choosing to see nobody in the hope that he would remain unseen. He focused on the painting. The river would wash the thoughts of her away. He could sweep away into the distance on its soft curve. But the future that the river flowed towards was empty. It mirrored the gray sky and carried the reflection of nothing to nowhere. Spencer couldn't let the water take him there. He moved on, feeling that the stare from the direction of the large, dark portrait was being unfairly reserved for him, despite the presence of another moving around the space with him now. Spencer had driven when he should have been sleeping. He had imagined that he would find peace in the distance that he'd put between himself and the bathroom. But all he had done was stretch his fear over a greater space and carry it with him to a new town. His air-dried shirt stank, and his roomy eyes watched his tired feet trudge over the parquet, avoiding the ceaseless gaze of the guard. The next painting looked much more like her than the gleaning girl had. This young girl was sleeping. The soft pink arm curling around creased, plump pillows was hers. The arm belonged to the feet, steaming and pinkly clean, sticking up out of the water, hanging over the edge of the bath. This was a portrait of the arm that had once encircled him at the house of a mutual friend and made the deal between them. The small hand had settled on his back and told him the lie that she would never leave. After the clumsy, self-taught chess of their early relationship, they had moved into a flat together and settled into a domestic stalemate. Their dreamt future rapidly revealed itself to be unwinnable. His career prematurely lost with the part of him that he sacrificed to the medication. She became his whole unlosable life. If he could continue at all, then it could only be with her. She could never leave him, and he could never leave her. Spencer stared at the sleeping girl in the painting. Her short brown hair was still neat. Her sleep could only have been the briefest of naps. It was not the knotted mop that had once smothered the pillow next to his, the sun-catching nest for her late sleeping head. And neither was it the weightless weed that had billowed and writhed under the bath's hot water. The smooth, pink arm hadn't been strong enough to free the hair from the splash and suck of the water. But when the struggle was over, and the only movement was the curl of steam over the ripples cast by a single tear, the peace in her face was the same as that of the painting's sleeping girl. Spencer had given her peace and left none for himself. She could never leave him now. Spencer felt the guard's stare on his back. The footsteps of the other visitor were gone, and he bore the stare alone. The guard was staring with her eyes, bath poached and unblinking. They steamed into Spencer, seeing his past and keeping him tied to the present of the gallery. The guard knew. The paintings knew. Spencer turned quickly, forced to move by the suspicion of the guard and the watching walls. The guard was not there. There was nobody there. The wet footprints of some rain-chased visitor crossed the polished floor between him and the tall, dark portrait on the opposite wall. He followed the watery tracks towards the painting. He walked, transfixed, until his shins pulled the low barrier wire bowstring tight. And then he leant in further, creasing at the waist. His eyes dragged to the canvas. He looked at his own face, staring back at him. The last time he had looked at himself, he had seen a steam-softened reflection quivering over the rock pool of a slack mouth. Now he saw a perfect mirror image of himself, no less immaculate in its likeness for being scraped in thick oils. The red eyes were one slow blink away from the terror of sleep. Spencer's painted brow was creased in the frown that the image forced him to wear, but the shirt in the canvas still dripped with the splashes of struggle, and the hands, which hung limply at his sides, were pink and steaming. In the background, a bath, a murmuration of flicked brush strokes, showing the same gossamer steam rising from it that wreathed the pink hands. It was a masterpiece. Spencer was mesmerized. Footsteps came and went, clicking and squeaking around Spencer, indifferent to his fixation. His lower back burned as he leant into the painting. He felt glances of concern slip over him and then vanish as visitors moved on and abandoned the petrified man. Spencer needed to move on too. He needed to look away from the pleading red eyes to continue his escape, but he could not. The barrier wire cut into his fleshless shins, and pain climbed up his legs to burn at the base of his craning spine. His mouth dried as his unblinking eyes gummed and seeped. After an unknown length of time, when Spencer saw the steam in the painting begin to curl and climb, creeping out of the frame, the lights went out. The darkness moved in the steam and rolled unseen towards Spencer. He felt its hot caress, and then the vapor settling and condensing in his raw throat. A hand, dripping, warm and small, found the base of his burning spine and pushed with an irresistible strength. Spencer surged forward into the blackness, back to the bathroom he had never escaped. If she could never leave him, then he would never leave her. The next morning, the gallery guard flicked a row of switches, triggering a staccato dawn, which bounced the rarely visited room rapidly in and out of existence before it settled into the new day. As the guard took up his position, he noticed that wet footprints still marked the unmopped floor in front of the large, bleak painting of the man with rolled-up sleeves and the pallor of an unripe strawberry. Behind the man, glinting eyes peeked through a tangle of wet hair over the edge of a steaming bath 308 years later. Just listen. Don't talk. You need time to wake up, for your eyesight to return. Everything will be a little hazy, and you might not remember how you got here, but you need to focus on my voice. My name is Dr. Yadav. I tried to lean forward, but my body felt as if it weighed 100 tons. I barely moved an inch before I slumped back into the bed. This is going to be a lot to hear at once, but it's important that you know these things right away. In 2043, Your body was suspended in an experimental bioamber, freezing your body until woken. You participated in this trial because you had been diagnosed with Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease and given 6 months to live. At the time of your diagnosis, researchers estimated that they were less than 30 years from finalizing a cure. How long? I coughed, a thin film of bioamber, tasting like burnt paracetamol, covering every receptor inside my mouth, nose, and throat. You can talk. That's excellent. Much quicker than the others. Excellent. Superb, he said, pausing to make a note. Well, I don't mean to use too much of an old cliché, but there's bad news and there's good news. The good news is a cure has been found, and it was administered before you woke up. Congratulations. You're free of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. The bad news is that it didn't come as quickly as researchers had expected. Tell me, I sputtered. My eyelids flickered as I tried to force them open. The agreement that you signed stipulated that you were only to be woken up after a cure had been found. The year is now 2351. You didn't know that it would take 308 years when you signed that document. And for that, I am truly sorry. There should have been a clause in the agreement that prevented this scenario from coming to fruition. There was much debate within the scientific community as to whether or not you should be woken up. And I hope that you feel we made the right choice. Mr. Jones, welcome to the 24th century. This isn't funny, I snapped, but I already knew that he was telling the truth. I could feel it in the tone of his voice, the way the air felt as I breathed it in, the unfamiliar ambient noise trickling into the room. But I couldn't admit it. Not yet. Did Angela put you up to this? What the hell is going on? Said the doctor, tapping away at a device. After a short pause, he told me that it appears your sister was buried in July 2089. I'm so sorry for your loss. Once you've fully recovered, we can take you to where she was buried, if you'd like. My vision was returning, each second bringing a small increase in light. I could now make out the silhouette of the doctor, his sympathetic stance over my bed. Really? This was all I could say. What else could I say to him? I already believed him. It was starting to come back to me in pieces. Angela, the disease, hospital. I can remember her face screwed up like a pillow, crying and asking me if I was sure. I told her I'd be back before she knew it. I'm afraid so. As far as we can tell, you have no living family beyond distant cousins. I can imagine that this must be a lonely experience for you. But believe me when I say that we're all here for you. I tried to swing my legs off of the side of the bed, but could only muster a twitch. Mr. Jones, it may be some time until you're back on your feet again. You'll need a few days to adjust," he said, watching my face as I winced at my immobile legs. The man's voice was kind. He really wanted the best for me, I felt. "You're going to need some rest. You're suffering from what we can only describe as severe jet lag. Your body clock was expecting it to be 3 centuries ago when you woke up. Is that how jet lag works? We don't know. Nobody has been in amber for nearly as long as you, and it's been decades since anyone has been woken up. We won't know what the effects on your body have been yet, but we'll keep a close eye on it." When he returned the next day, after I'd slept for what felt like weeks, his tone had begun to shift. It was almost imperceptible, but I could feel the change innately. "Good morning, Mr. Jones. How are we feeling this morning?" "Good." I nodded. "I'm starving, though. I feel like I haven't eaten in centuries. Do you have anything?" Dr. Yadav smiled, pointing toward the tubes that connected my forearm to a machine next to the bed. I inspected it closely, only now aware of my vision having completely returned. "All the nutrients that you'll be needing for now," he said. I sat up in the bed, feeling a world better than the day before, but still weak and unable to completely support my body weight. "So, Doc, what's the world like out there? What's changed? Don't tell me. Flying cars, right?" The doctor exhaled, looking up, shaking his head. Imagine trying to explain the world as you knew it to someone from 1743. Almost impossible, isn't it? Telephones, the internet, airplanes. It would all be so far removed from his reality that it would be impossible to explain in a way that he would really understand. His lack of understanding might even lead him to believe that people from your time live in a hellish place. I paused and reflected. Could it really be that different? I looked around. The one small window on the other side of the room was frosted, the bed like any other I'd seen, and the rest of the room almost entirely featureless. "You're wondering if it's really that different, huh?" he said. "The room has been specifically designed to not overwhelm you. A lot of preparation has gone into waking you. We've been waiting for this for a long time. We just don't know what to expect. So we're taking things slowly. I hope you understand." "I'll be fine, Doc, honestly. I'm actually quite excited to go out and see the world, see what's come of it. And by the way, where am I? Chicago. The city of your birth, I'm told. It only seemed right that you were moved to this facility before we woke you. But you're not ready to head outside just yet. There's a lot of things that we'd need to explain to you before you went out there. Otherwise, it might all too overwhelming. I mean, just us telling you about the world is going to be overwhelming. But to see it, to see what's out there, it'll take some adjusting, that's for sure. I'm sure I can handle it, but I'll take your word for it. When will I be better? Back on my feet? Only a day or two. As I said, what's happening to you isn't something that's ever really happened before, so there's still a few unknowns. Good, good. So, what next? A tenseness seemed to creep onto the doctor's shoulders, and with a twitch in his eye, he began to shift his weight from one foot to the other, as if suddenly disassociating and leaving the room entirely. Doc? Oh, yes, he snapped out of his daze. We'll need to run some tests. You're a man from the past. There's a lot we can learn about you. But it'll all be fine. Really, it will be. When he had told me that I had woken into a world 308 years beyond my own, his tone of voice told me that he was telling the truth. His tone of voice was now telling me that he was lying, and I was right. That night, whilst I was half asleep, 3 new doctors came in. Is he awake? One of them whispered to another. They tapped away at their pads, prompting a hiss from the machine beside me, which was the last thing that I heard before waking up in a new room, blinded by lights. I was naked, lying flat on a slab, my wrists and ankles inexplicably bound to its corners. My head turned from side to side to look, but there were no straps holding me in place. As if by magic, I was restrained. I looked down towards my ankles to find that my abdomen had been opened like a fruit or a pair of double doors. My skin attached on the sides of my body, but resting like blankets beside me. A machine hovered above me, metal instruments dangling towards the undulating yellow and pink of my innards. Immediately, I screamed, and the machine spun towards me before I passed out again. I awoke back in my bed, slowly at first, before shifting into a panicked scramble up the bed. I lifted my shirt quickly, but found nothing. No evidence of surgery. Panting, I began to realize that it was simply a dream. There was no other explanation. An awful dream, so vivid, so frightening, that if I hadn't had woken, I would have never known not to be reality. The doctor came in. Mr. Jones, how are you feeling? You're looking a little sweaty. I'll get the heat turned down. He tapped away at his device. Just a bad dream. I'm fine. I guess I'm just adjusting to being awake after all this time. Yes, when we're treading new biological waters, we're bound to discover new effects on the human body and mind. That's why it's important for you to stay here, under observation for the time being. But listen, that's not why I'm here, he said, walking to the window, picking up a seat under it, and bringing it back to place beside the bed. Sitting down, taking on a somber expression, he explained, "There is a legal responsibility as your doctor to fully inform you of your options, all of them. Since you're not from this time, you won't know that euthanasia is a common practice now. We don't force anyone to choose between life or a brutal, self-inflicted death. You should know that being a patient of ours, this is something we can provide to you for free. It's designed to be quite pleasant. I just want you to know that this option will always be available. Thanks, Doc, I chuckled. Good to know, he nodded, tapped at his device again, catching me completely off guard. I was now falling asleep again. In the first few moments, I wondered if I had miscommunicated. Perhaps this was euthanasia. Was I dying? Was I being sedated? I should have been clearer. I tried to protest, but only managed a small murmur before slipping under. When I awoke, I was back on that terrible slab, held captive again under the piercing lights of the operating table. I looked down to find that, whilst my abdomen was intact, there was something wrong with my leg. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but it didn't look or feel as it should. I looked across to find that cruel machine again. This time it was facing away from me, inspecting something. I squinted, trying to shut out the operating lights and focus. It was holding something. A stick. Something white, slightly yellowish. It spun around and zipped back to hover over me again, obscuring the view of my strange leg. It moved in such an impossible way, as if completely weightless, like a ghost. Just then, a piercing, white-hot pain shot up my leg. My muscles seized up, turning to stone, as pain flooded and swelled into every fiber of tissue. Through the pain, I moved my head to get a better look. Two of its arachnid appendages were sliding my shin bone back into my body through a small opening below my knee. I cried out, wailed even, before fainting. The machine didn't even need to sedate me. Waking once more, back in my bed, I pulled up my linen trouser leg. Nothing. I sigh, adjusting myself back into bed, the image of the machine still bright in my mind. I felt almost embarrassed to have dreamt something so unrealistic, so childish. It was made of a black metal, the deepest black, whilst at the same time being as shiny as a serving spoon. Its body was spherical, with a number of appendages hanging down below it, like the legs of a bug or an arachnid. At the end of each of them, some kind of tool or device, blades, rods, syringes. And when it had turned to me, I had seen that a part of its spherical surface was in fact a tinted glass, a glint of light revealing a large lens behind it. And the strangest thing, it glided around so quickly without making even the slightest sound. It was completely silent. I suppose my imagination couldn't stretch as far as imagining a sound for it. After a short while, an orderly entered the room. "From the doctor," he said, as he handed me one of their devices. It was square, about half the size of a piece of paper and was transparent, but only from the side with the interface. On the screen was a short paragraph about euthanasia, with 2 options below it: accept, decline. I pressed decline and felt the sensation of pressing a physical button suspended in 3 dimensions inside the device. The orderly, having waited patiently, took the device and turned to leave. As he was making his exit, he hesitated, pausing in his stride for a minute and beginning to turn before recommitting to his path. "Everything okay?" I asked. He paused again, taking his time to think before he turned. I'm sorry," he said, visibly nervous. He was small, childlike, no older than 20. "I've heard so much about you, and to see you here, I can't believe it. I studied about you." "You're really from the 2040s? I nodded, smiling like a wise old monk. "So, what was it like? The past? Was it like they say?" "Well, what do they say?" "They say it was good. A simple way of living. The birth of technology, the information era. I can't imagine what it was like." "Yeah, it was good. I miss it a lot. If only I knew what this world was like, I would have some point of reference to describe my own time to him. It sure didn't feel simple at the time, but maybe stuff got even more complicated since then." His eye twitched as I said this, an indecipherable emotion sweeping across his face, just like the doctor's had. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I guess." With that, he left the room without another word. I spent the remainder of the day thinking about the outside world. What could possibly be so overwhelming for me? Flying cars? A city in the sky? Or had they lied to keep me here and stop me from leaving early? It annoyed me that they hadn't even given me a clue. "I'll take a peek," I decided. "Tonight. I'll sneak out of the front door for a few moments, take in the sights of whatever is outside. At least then I'll have a taste, without actually being thrust out to navigate a new world on my own." Dr. Yadav said that they'd always look after me. Of course, I waited for hours, picturing all of the possibilities. I thought about the year 1700, compared it with the year 2000, the immense societal and technological shifts over the years. Could it really be the same degree of change? Life in 2000 was better than in 1700, I concluded. So, life now must be better than in my own time. In the dead of night, I left the room, moving carefully down the dim hallway. It was as featureless as my room. I didn't need to walk for long before I spotted a sign above a door. Emergency exit. Before entering, I instinctively checked the hall. I looked right. I looked left. I froze, swung my head right again. There it was, gliding silently at the end of the hallway That awful machine, at this distance, a marauding silhouette. I shot down the stairs like a bullet. As I moved, my hands fumbled across my abdomen, looking for a scar. How could they? I lamented. They're keeping me here for their experiments, to examine me, my bones, my flesh. I felt sick. They couldn't lie to me anymore. I'd outsmarted them. I'll leave and never come back, I told myself. Finally, I reached the bottom of the stairs and found a set of double doors. I listened out for the machine, knowing full well that if it were coming, I wouldn't hear it. With a hand on the push bar, I considered for a moment my predicament. No evidence that my nightmares were real. Could my mind, destroyed by disease and time travel, have betrayed me? A flying, silent machine? I supposed that I would find out soon enough. I was outside for 17 minutes. That's all it took before I was back at the door, banging on the cold iron until my fists were bloody. Let me in! God damn you all to hell, you bastards! I want euthanasia. I want it now. I want it now. Let me back in. You made me a sales pitch. Molly pushed open the door of the conference room. It was a loud, heavy, metal one that left her fingers smelling of dust. She brushed them on her colorful leggings. The conference room wasn't well lit, but it was in a cheap motel on the side of the highway, so Molly hadn't expected much. It smelled of stale coffee and sugary pastries that were piled like faux gold on the table pressed against one wall. Sadie turned and smiled at her. The women embraced each other. "Thanks for coming out, beautiful," exclaimed Sadie. Molly nodded back, her eyebrows slightly raised at the memory of her husband, asking why she was bothering to come at all. She had explained that Sadie did help them move in, and she was always inviting her to things. But Molly always declined, and it was just preposterous. And the kids had sleepovers, so they were occupied and he had stopped listening. "I was happy to," said Molly. She released Sadie from her hug, but found that she held on. Awkwardly, Molly attempted to rewrap her arms around Sadie's long, thin body. That girl just never seemed to gain any weight. Sadie chuckled a bit and gestured at the pastries and coffee. "Coffee at 9 p.m., Sadie?" teased Molly. "I thought people liked coffee," protested Sadie. "We do. It's just a bit late, don't you think?" said Molly as she approached the table. "Sadie, don't you think?" She repeated her question. "Sadie?" Molly spun around, but found her friend had walked off to the computer. She shrugged and snagged herself a cup, but the burnt smell put her off a bit. She grabbed a cherry Danish and a napkin before taking a seat on one of the black plastic chairs. "Oh," exclaimed Sadie. "Oh, sweetie, could you please sit in that chair?" She indicated the chair on the end of the row at the right-hand side, instead of in the middle where she could clearly see the presentation. "Sorry, babe. It's just, more gals are comin'. So," she let her O drag out uncomfortably and pursed her lips, and then smiled at Molly, who was scrambling with her pastry and purse. "Who else is coming?" asked Molly. Sadie spun on her heel. "What? Who else is coming?" repeated Molly as she settled into her new chair. "Oh, some gals from the book club, I hope, and some friends of mine." Her words trailed off. Molly began throwing her hair into a bun, an old habit she had when she got nervous. She tried to be polite and asked, "Do I know any of these friends?" "No, doll, but you'll love 'em, I promise," said Sadie as she marched over to Molly. "God, I do love that dress with those leggings. Just so cute. Perfect for fall," she added, pointing with a polished red nail at the brightly covered leaves that dotted her friend's legs. Sadie grabbed a napkin. She dusted off the chair Molly was just in. Molly, for her part, opened up her mouth to protest that she wasn't dirty when another guest burst through the door. It was quite clear to Molly that Sadie knew this girl better than her because they squealed at the exact same decibel. Molly overheard Sadie mention something about work. At that word, Molly frowned. She remembered work. She remembered lunch with friends, gossip in the break room, and feeling like she was actually contributing to something. Of course, that was all before motherhood. Molly rolled her eyes to keep from crying and raised her pastry to her lips. A few tantalizing flakes fell off, but when she went to bite down, she found the treat rock hard. Disgusted, she removed it from her eyeline and wrapped it up in the napkin. She sniffed her coffee warily, but found a similar level of grossness at the sight of shiny oil circles catching in the light flickering above her head. Molly sighed, longing for her warm bed and beloved husband's soft protests at random news articles that flashed by on the silent TV. She noted Sadie's new friend was permitted to sit in the middle and that the woman didn't take a single snack or cup of tar. But hey, it wasn't like she was missing out. She was rail thin, just like Sadie. Perhaps she was part of the same spin class. A calendar, without extracurricular, for the kids certainly has more time. Molly sighed. A few more women entered. They came in pairs, like on Noah's Ark. 2 women in all black dresses. 2 women in bright leggings that sent a bolt of envy up Molly's spine. 2 women in fur coats who didn't greet Sadie, but joined the first woman with bright red hair in the middle. Sadie kept looking at the door and checking her watch. At exactly 9:15, Sadie flicked the lights off and wobbled to the front in her high heels. The presentation had started. "Welcome, beautiful souls," flashed up on the screen. The words were decorated with pretty pink sparkles and brightly lit up the room. Thank you for joining me so late tonight, my darlings. But as you know, I didn't want a single excuse about work running late. She clapped her hands together, and it echoed around the room. The side chatter stopped. I want to talk to you about an exciting opportunity that has just changed my life for the better, began Sadie. She looked like a creepy ghost behind the bright light of the presentation. Molly suddenly felt very cold. Before I get into the nitty-gritty details, I want to share all of the perks that this lifestyle has given me, said Sadie. She flashed the next screen, where bullet points began to zoom into focus as she read them out. It has given me eternal youth, a low-calorie diet, which is totally customizable, incredible investment opportunities, and lifelong friendships. Suddenly, the door burst open. In walked two women, clearly late to the party. But Molly was relieved because their hair was in messy ponytails. They looked around the room and mumbled apologies. She thought she noticed a fruit pouch from the same brand she purchased sticking out of one woman's person. Sadie directed them to the chairs next to Molly, with a sour look on her face. Molly eagerly made room for the women. Sadie cleared her throat. Now that all of our guests have managed to arrive, she paused for dramatic effect, her gaze barreling down at Molly's row. We can continue the presentation. Molly's eyebrows furrowed with concern as she heard the words of her husband echoing back at her that this whole night was a bad idea because she didn't even know these women. But she missed the community of her old city. They had picnics in the park with the kids, a carpool schedule, neighborhood block parties. Of course, that was before it all fell apart. How can you get these opportunities and more, you may ask? Sadie's bright voice brought Molly back to the present, but got real screechy at the end of that question. Molly felt a cold shiver run down her back. It starts with me. My name is Sadie Malone. Sadie clicked the next slide, and a beautiful professional photo of Sadie in a power suit beneath a weeping willow appeared. And I have been involved with this group for, well, Sadie let out a giggle. Centuries. She flashed a winning smile and clicked to the next slide, which showed an edge of an acrylic painting of her flashed on screen. She was dressed in a medieval gown. The artist had captured the beauty of the very same tree from the previous slide, only smaller. Sadie seemed the same exact age. Her skin was less smooth, but the artist still captured it, creamy color against the backdrop of the rushing river. Molly listened for the sound of bird chirping, insects as they flew past her ear. It was as if she'd traveled back in time. The piece felt familiar, and she placed it as one she had seen during a visit to the art museum. A sense of dread began to fill her. Yep, that's me. Can you believe it? She asked. Sadie seemed to grow taller as she leaned into the audience. "It's like I haven't aged a day. And neither will you if you choose to join our 3-step program." Her voice seemed to echo in Molly's ears. She felt herself growing tired and colder with each passing second. She readjusted her position in the chair and pinched herself to stay awake. The next slide showed a photo of Sadie embracing a woman in a side hug. "This is BB," said Sadie. "She looks kinda sad, doesn't she?" Sadie's clicker turned into a single red laser dot, which darted over the woman's frumpy dress, unappealing limp hair, and sad teeth. "Well, after 1 month with me, she went from this," Sadie clicked to the next slide, "to this." Before them was a bright photo of a drop-dead gorgeous model who Molly swore she recognized from a red carpet or two. She wore a long red ball gown. Her hair was curled into beautiful waves, and her smile was now white as bone. Now, I will warn you ladies that if you don't follow every step of this program, deadly consequences await you. Sadie's voice seemed to drop an octave, and the image of BB faded. Molly felt Sadie's icy blue eyes lasering into her. It felt like everyone left the room except the two of them. She felt safe and warm in her friend's gaze. The cold of the conference room had melted away, giving into the promise of eternal youth. I can't sleep, can't give in," mumbled Molly under her breath. "If I sleep, I'll die," she continued, and gripped the cheap plastic chair with all her might. "But I know you gorgeous, gorgeous gals aren't dumb enough to not listen to me, right?" exclaimed Sadie. The spell was broken. BB was back to being bright, as was Sadie's tone. "Now for the nitty-gritty, darlings. And I want you to know, I'm only sharing this opportunity with you because I just feel so close to all of you," she said, as she clutched her hands into a fist around her heart. There were soft murmurings of agreement. "The first step to this whole thing is to let me bite you." Sadie's voice had a tinge of glee at the very end. "No, seriously, ladies, I'm not joking. I summoned you because I just think y'all will make the very best vampires in the whole gosh dang world. Because when I bite you, you pledge your undying loyalty and servitude to me, your BFF. And after that, you can host vampire parties of your very own. So you, too, can create your own vampire communities. Isn't that great?" Then she used that icy gaze again. The world faded around Molly, and she was left in the embrace of her friend's warm spell as she said, "Just remember, you'll always be a part of mine, and loyalty to me always comes first. Best friends for life." Molly sat stunned in her chair. Her heartbeat pounded like in the movies. Sweat formed on her neck and dripped down her body. She felt like a child who had put too many blankets on the bed too early in the fall. It was just so hot. And Sadie had the solution. Sadie could cool her down. Sadie could fix her. She blinked her heavy eyelids a few times. Her face was fully relaxed. Subconsciously, her hand drifted to her neck. She felt it drift up her face, pull back, and slap her cheek as hard as it could. It was a technique her father had taught her as part of her driving lessons. Suddenly, as the room came back into view, something inside her screamed at her to run, grab her purse, and run. But it was like her legs couldn't or wouldn't move. Instead, she found herself staring at the presentation before her. Like zombies, the women beside her began to stand and join the line in front of Sadie. It was a horrible, perverse version of communion. Desperately, Molly looked around for the exit, but the darkness around her made it quite the challenge. She reached down for her purse, coffee, and pastry. Slowly, she stood up, suddenly thankful Sadie had forced her into the aisle seat. Molly was careful not to turn her back and was slightly transfixed at the sight of Sadie pulling the women in closer around herself. She seemed to be whispering soft words as she stroked one woman's long, red hair. Molly inched past the final row of chairs, careful to have it between her and the group of hypnotized victims. She used one hand to feel behind her, looking for the edge of the pastry table, but she backed in too quickly, and the table hit the wall. All eyes turned to Molly. "Ah!" screamed Molly. She decided at that moment to turn her back and look for the door. She sensed that the mob had turned and began to stumble over the chairs, reaching for her, grabbing at her. Their arms and hands were like vines. Molly searched her memory desperately as she replayed the night. She had moved chairs. She had been at the center. She had gotten a pastry and coffee. But which one had been closer to the door? Sadie's voice rang high above the moans of her servants. "Molly, Molly, come back, Molly. Please, won't you be the best vampire babe in the world? The coffee." The coffee had been closest to the door, so Molly turned herself around again and was face to face with the girl with red hair. Her eyes were glazed over. Her mouth hung open, and she was blocking Molly's path. As the other women began to draw closer to them, Molly scrambled with what to do. She felt a bit of coffee slosh over her hand, so she threw that in the girl's face. When she remained unfazed, Molly threw her pastry at the woman. This seemed to stun her, so she grabbed more pastries. Each one hit like the rocks they were, and slowly the stranger stumbled back. Molly bolted to the coffee, but was greeted by the pair of women in black dresses. They smiled at her, holding their hands out like friends. Their fangs glistened despite the lack of light. Molly smiled sweetly back, just so she could open the top of the silver carafe and push the coffee over. The women wailed in agony as burning hot coffee poured out. Molly found her door and pushed with all her might into an empty hotel hallway. She ran past the bewildered guests and the bored concierge. She considered telling them to call the cops, but knew from experience no one would believe her anyway. The burst of cold night air filled Molly with adrenaline. She pushed the alarm button on her car and ran to it. In the safety of her vehicle, she locked all the doors. She let out a guttural sob. "I just want friends," she wailed into the night. After a few moments, instinct kicked in and threw the car in reverse to get her home. James was asleep when Molly returned. She was shocked to find it was after midnight. She double, triple checked all the lights were on, and the doors were locked. So were the windows. As she approached the bed, she reached beneath her husband's pillow and wrapped cold fingers on the wooden stake. Then, her excuses. Ted body wrapped itself in the warmth of her husband and attempted to fall asleep to the rhythmic sound of his beating heart. Morning came and went. The work week came and went. By the following Saturday, the nightmares of the last week felt like a scary dream. Of course, that's when the letter came. It didn't come by postman or dropped off at work. It was nailed to Molly's front door one night when she got home from work. The letter's envelope wasn't like the normal white one you find at the office. The paper was rough and slightly yellowed, like when her son, Jake, had a school project, so they soaked paper in coffee to make it look old. And when Molly flipped it to the front, it bore a pretty, pink, sparkly seal with the letter S on it. Her husband told her, wait for him to open it. So after the kids went to bed, they sat up in theirs and slowly broke the seal. Inside was a sheet of paper which had Sadie's beautiful calligraphy that matched Molly's original invite to the conference. The message was short and sweet. I really think you should reconsider, babe, for your family's sake. Call me. S. Molly crumpled up the letter. You gotta admit, it's a new tactic. They usually just invite us over for a BBQ and a few cheap beers, James said with a laugh. Then, realizing his wife wasn't laughing with him, he added, guess it's time to move again. Molly remained quiet. A few tears gathered in her eyes. James once again tried to lighten the mood. You think one of them would figure out I'm a descendant of the Van Helsings before inviting you over? Maybe that's why they keep trying. Like some sick cat and mouse game, she replied, her voice trembling. Then, with a frown on her face, she added, I just wish I could find some real friends. He offered her a warm embrace, much more comforting than last night, as he whispered into her hair, "Someday you will, I promise." James was wise enough to let her pull away. She marched into James's home office. He couldn't see her eyes, and turned on the shredder. It roared to life, grinding the letter into tiny pieces of confetti. Cerulean. The door is cerulean, a bright and vibrant blue. But really, it is the color of my sudden uneasiness. The feeling creeps up me slowly, jumps out at me dauntingly, and I am frozen in it. If the door were a mirror, and how I wish it were as innocent as a mirror, I would see my face reflected back to me, and it would tell me to run. I'm not sure what's more jarring. The fact that this door is a clashing contrast to the rest of the library decor, or the fact that I've never noticed the path we took to get here before. I suppose there are better things to do freshman year than look for the oddities and notice the details inside the university library. Or maybe it's the subtle shift in his gaze that is so jarring, the way his grip on me transforms, and the way his voice now suddenly holds something heavy, concealed behind his hardened whispers. It seems impossible to retreat now. And even if I had the courage to turn and run away, following my screaming gut all the way down the stairs and out the library doors, there is still a part of me that is curious, hopeful, lustful. Wasn't dating a professor supposed to feel dangerous? Wasn't that how it felt just moments ago when he'd pressed me up against the wall of shelved books downstairs and kissed me? And I thought to myself, is there anything more thrilling than this? Wasn't it that same exciting feeling that I felt when he'd whispered into my neck that he had a secret to show me? And I eagerly followed him up the stairs. I had thought it was thrilling before, when we were nothing but flirty eyes and lingering bodies inside an empty lecture hall room, neither of us willing to be the first to say goodbye. He'd chipped away at his desk with his nails, while I'd fingered it, tracing circles and pathways across the dark mahogany wood, each stroke a question. What would your skin think of this? Meanwhile, our mouths said frivolous things, silly words about the weather and hometowns and restaurants off campus, things that had nothing to do with anthropology assignments. Between those words, our silences begged the other to stay just a little longer, so we could eventually, maybe, use our mouths for other things. We were testing the waters then, seeing how far we would swim out before turning back. It turned out this professor could swim all the way out to my dorm room, somewhere I'd never seen another professor go. "Let me take you to the library tonight," he'd whispered. "I can get us in after it's closed." His voice had been desperate and demanding, like I could break him if I said no. I wanted to savor the power I had over him in that moment, like licking the peanut butter off of a spoon. But there was no chance I would say no. I would have given him my heart on a silver platter right then. I was breathless when I said, "What time?" Hours later, under a hazy orange street lamp, I'd watched his fingers unlock the double doors like a jungle cat eyeing its prey. I wanted to lunge at them, feel them unlocking my body. But even then, just moments ago, I still hadn't been sure. That dangerous, thrilling ripple somewhere within me, undulating like a wave. There is nothing illegal about doing the things we both wanted to do. Just a school policy that both of us treated like nothing but a suggestion. When the doors pulled open, the scent of the library engulfed me. I read somewhere that the smell of old books is actually the smell of organic matter reacting to light and heat, a decomposition of wood pulp. But really, it is the scent of my body on fire. When I told him, he only smiled, running his finger across the spines as he guided me down one of the aisles. All of these stories dying beneath our fingertips, and we get to live a whole other life just by splitting them open. When I'd heard those words, I thought he was a ixy, young, anthropologic, literary genius, and I couldn't believe he'd chosen me. In that moment, I was certain I'd let him split me open and read me like one of those books. But now, there is an edginess to this thrill, a sense of danger that hadn't surfaced yet, a creature rising from the midnight zone, hairs standing up on the back of my neck, or is that his breath? I feel my bones run cold, like I am standing on a precipice, and if I open that door, I might free fall right into the sky. I've never showed anyone this before, he lies, but I barely register his words, my mind lost in a tumbleweed of disregarded warnings from my mother, from friends, from school advisories, the university campus newspaper. 3 freshman girls still missing. He wraps his arms around my waist, like we are comfortable lovers now. Like the one kiss we shared downstairs turned our student-teacher relationship into something more intimate. I lean into it, still playing the part of the brave girl. I thought I wanted that. I followed him up those stairs, wanting just that. There is still a part of me that does. Fear has stolen many of these experiences from me. And I'd promised this year would be different, didn't I? I shouldn't take hold of the doorknob, but I do. And I hear him giggle behind me. It sounds like victory. It sounds like, "Good girl." There's no creak when I turn it. The handle glides smoothly, and I hear it unlatch. In another life, I push the door open, and there is a room with a small round table sitting in the middle. It is adorned with a white cloth and candles, and there is a violinist playing a soft, soothing song. From somewhere, a perfectly prepared steak meal is delivered, and we slice it slowly with our knives while drinking wine and slurring out delectable secrets. In that life, we make love above 1,000 love stories bound in leather and spend years happily together. After I graduate, we get married and have 2 children, Olive and Iris. We grow old together, and tonight becomes a treasured story about the romantic night when we fell in love, a story that belongs in one of those books downstairs. In another life, I open the door, and there is a boring room with a game of chess set up for us on a table in the corner. We play a few rounds, him winning twice before he finally lets me win once. I pretend to love it, and we date in secret for a few months before things fizzle out. Maybe there's a dramatic ending, and I spend a summer lovesick and cursing his name, knowing I'll never forget the year I dated my college professor. In another life, I let the door handle go and sprint down the stairs, running faster than I ever have all the way back to my dorm room. I tell my roommate all about it and wonder if I let my fear make a fool out of myself again. In this life, I push the door open, and there is a room that has no table, no white cloth, and no chessboard. There is a room with 4 walls, ones I wish had mirrors on them so I could see my reflection. The realization settling in my eyes would tell me there's a shark in the water, to swim fast, even though I know it's too late. They would tell me the truth, that I might never see the color cerulean again. Drawing a blank, I am freaking out. How can I explain this? I'm in a full-blown, it's a wonderful life scenario here, but in reverse. I'm not seeing what the world would look like if I had never been born. I'm seeing the world where I was born. But the joke's on me. You know, like when a guy walks up to you and addresses you by name, and you've got no idea who he is. Now, you're damned if you do, and damned if you don't, right? Say, "Who are you again?" And you've offended the guy. Greet him like an old buddy, and he's going to expect you to comment on your shared past. I mean, clearly, you've met him before, and he remembers that meeting. He knows who you are, but you don't know him from Adam. Now, let's take that lovely little conundrum and grow that to the size of a galaxy. And maybe you'll begin to get an idea of what I'm dealing with here. For me, it's everyone and everything. My mind has completely drawn a blank. Taking inventory. I'm in the student center. This is the College of New Jersey. It doesn't look familiar, but there's a sign by the bookstore that gives away the setting. There's an Introduction to Psychology textbook in my hands. A flat screen with a list of rooms for final exams is on the brick wall by the bookstore. So, it is exam season. I have a psychology class, and it's freezing outside. I'm wearing a full-length pea coat, a black one, with those big buttons, lapels, and an extended collar, indicating it is December. I'm a man in my early 20s, judging by the reflection staring back at me from the window of the bookstore. And I'm well put together, if I do say so myself. Harry, did you bone up on Professor Panarella's legendary hypotheticals? A voice behind me says. So, judging by this, I'm Harry. Whoever the hell that is. Turning, I see a prim, bleary-eyed blonde with blue eyes, bangs, and a sorority sweatshirt, clutching a large metal coffee travel tumbler to her chest. The sweater has the name Penny written on it in block letters, so I'm guessing she's Penny. I'm kind of at a loss, to be honest, I say. Shit, Harry. Again? I know you are kind of a prodigy, but this is Panarella we're talking about. He's got a reputation for failing students who are unprepared. You can't just wing this one. Well, this is confidence-inspiring. Where do ideas come from? Where do memories reside? Where does your mind go when it wanders? Where would one go to track it down again? These are not matters of metaphysical concern. These are life and death issues. I mean, I'm royally screwed here. Penny provides me with a clue. I mean, out of everyone, I'd think you'd be ready for the exam. And why is that, Penny? I ask, really wanting to know. Because you are his research assistant, silly, she says with a giggle. Now, I'm wondering what kind of relationship I have with this girl. She's giggling, twirling her hair, giving me a familiar look. There might be something going on between us. I'll come back to that. There are more immediate concerns. Oh, what research would that be? I say, with a playful affect, as if hunting for praise. Oh, you know, workaday stuff. Expanding on the theories of William James, the very father of psychology. Taking up the baton and puzzling out the mysteries of perception. Just real-world proof of the tenuous link between conscious awareness and behavior. The research study the two of you published, providing empirical evidence that conscious awareness or attention is absent nearly half the time, giving sway to automatic processing. And attention only comes into the picture when sleepwalking through common behaviors becomes too challenging. Wow. This girl has got it bad. She has, like, a dossier of my accomplishments. Huh? I say, for lack of a more appropriate grunt to express the tangled ball of emotions that her little speech has brought to the surface. But she has me thinking, by her math, I'm literally the most consciously aware person on the planet, since automatic processing isn't going to do shit for you if you don't even know who you are. I attempt to draw her out with aplomb, asking, "Which study was that again?" "The driving study, where you guys put sensors on people's heads while driving, and determined that their attention was completely absent, gone, their minds wandering, only being called back when something unexpected happened on the road that required their full attention." So, you're saying that attention is a spectrum, that our minds are here and there, wandering off in space, then returning only when needed? I ask. "Well, that was your thesis," she said, chewing on a Bic pen. "You feeling okay, Harry?" she asks. "Not remotely," I say. "Can we sit down?" "Sure, honey. We've got a few hours before the exam." And Penny leads me into the Rathskeller, where I immediately order a beer. "Budweiser?" Big Mike asks. I call him that because it is on the name tag, not because I remember. "Sure," I say, assuming he knows what I drink. "Are you sure it's a good idea to drink right now?" "You've got an exam," Penny says. "Under normal circumstances, I'd say no, but I need something. I don't feel well," I say. "You look pale," she says. "Your lips are blue, Harry." I hear an echo. "Your lips are blue, Harry. Blue Harry. Blue Harry." I see her bright blue, yes, floating away from me, her head inflating like a balloon. And this is when shit starts to get weird. The blood pounds in my ears. Breathe. My vision recedes, leaving me peering out at her through occluded fisheye lenses. The acidic cringe of bile rises in my throat. Just breathe. A cold sweat drenches my forehead. Deep breaths now, Harry. My shoulders writhe with spasms, and the back of my head burns like it is resting on a literal furnace. The shimmer of the sensation running along the temples to the front of my head. And somewhere inside, I know that I can't stop it. I have to let this play out. It is that feeling when something bad is happening, where you try to go somewhere else, distance yourself from it, float away, but you can't stop it. And then the fun begins. The rushing dizziness, like the feeling of sucking down helium. The whomp, whomp, whomp of the electricity sputtering out. The weakness of my arms dangling like weightless feathers by my sides. Somehow, I know that this is a conditioned physiological response. I know that everything is okay, but I don't believe it for a second. I dive into a pool of cold water. Tendrils of icy cold envelope my raw skin, as if the clothes have been cut off of me, leaving me naked, every nerve singing. The rush of movement, though still perched on the stool. The loss of place and time. Remember to breathe. Feels like hands are firmly pressing down on my neck, choking out my life's breath. I gasp for air, only catching crumbs of a breath. From the corner of my eye, something materializes, out of the wooden flooring of the Rathskeller. It is in the shadows of the stools. They lengthen and enlarge, running away toward the walls, and then snap back and pulse into 3 dimensions, and rise from the floor like cloaked assassins, their voices a droning electric hum, accented by mirthful screeches. 3 of them converge on me, slowly shuddering forth from the dust and jastin of the bar, shadows trailing behind their morbid forms like capes, malintentioned intruders from the realm of demons. Only I can see them. They are coming only for me. They are coming. They are coming quickly, almost upon me. I stumble backward, tipping over the stool, straddle my feet to break my fall, and crash to my backside. A violent flurry of sobs and wailing. My hands flail in front of me to keep them away as I kick my feet, one at a time, kicking myself back to the wall. I tuck in my knees and grip them in a desperate hug, screaming in terror as I wait for them to get me, which they do. It all goes black. Harry, 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 someone says. Slap. Ow, slap. Whoa! I shake my eyes open. It's a man, slapping me in the face. He's got a stubbly beard growing in, a round face with a protruding muzzle like a bear. I'd say he's either Italian or Polish. It's me, Professor Panarella. Are you back with us? He asks. How long was I out? I ask. About 15 minutes, he says, and I see Penny standing behind him, arms crossed, tapping a foot, looking very worried about me. Professor, there's a problem. I can't remember anything. Exactly. How'd you know? Penny told me, but it makes perfect sense. What? Why is that? Just lay back. Don't move. We've got to get you to the hospital. 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 Ha! Spit all. The world whomps and pulses, and my eyes close. And then I am back, sitting up in the hospital bed. Panarella is there. Penny is there, asleep in a chair, with her legs up on a table. The white curtain is drawn back. The hospital bed is perched up, so that I am looking forward in a seated position. Panarella approaches me with a syringe and injects it into my arm. I put up my other hand to protest, but I am so drained of energy. I just go with it. This is what you get for playing God, Harry, he says. Who do you think you are, goddamn Jonas Salk? Panarella asks. Wait. Are you saying that I did this to myself? I ask. Relevance, impartiality, welfare, and consent. Ethical canons of the research scientist. Remember those? He asks. Oddly, I think I do, I say. But I haven't the faintest idea why. Do no harm. Ever heard of that? Least of all to yourself. My God, Harry, what the fuck have you done this time? I was kind of hoping you would tell me. Jesus, Harry. We were testing the serum on hamsters. We were nowhere near ready for human trials. Serum? Up-fattening serum. Harry. A bridge to oblivion. The zombie anesthetic. A drug to separate awareness from perception. It was a breakthrough. But who knows what goes on in the mind of a hamster? It barely has a sense of self. Its whole life is almost entirely automatic processing. Whoa, Doc. Slow down. Help me out with this. Give me one of your famous hypotheticals, like Penny was telling me about. Okay. How do I explain this? You. What you call you is really a composite, a relationship, a master-servant relationship, like a dog and its master. The dog is your awareness, and what you call you, your perception, your selfhood, your experience of being you, is like the master. The thinking awareness, the automatic processing, is like the dog. I'm not sure I'm following you, Professor. I'm not talking to you right now. You are gone. All that is left is your awareness. The dog waiting at the door for its master to return. That's why you can't remember anything. Because you aren't here. We don't know where you have gone or how to get you back. Then where am I ask. I have no fucking idea, Harry. We've only just started these experiments. But you decided to use yourself as a human guinea pig. Sounds serious, Doc, I said. You, as we understand it, is really a community of yous. There's your bodily self, your perspectival self, your volitional self, your narrative self, and your social self. Each a mix of awareness and perception, each a compound of master and servant. And your unified self has been pulled apart into pure awareness. Unless we can get you back. Tell me about the driving experiment. The driving study was an experiment where we studied the brains of people experiencing the feeling one gets that they don't remember the drive home. We proved it was real, Harry. They don't remember the drive home because they weren't there. It is the functional equivalent of sleepwalking, proceeding entirely through automatic processing, like a computer carrying out a program. So it's possible that jarring a person out of automatic processing is the trigger that brings their perception, the master, the you, back into the game. I don't know, Harry, Panarella said, sitting back in the chair next to Penny, rousing her. Penny yawned and wiped her eyes. Penny smiled at me and said, "You're back." She rushed over and gave me a wet kiss on the lips, saying, "You had us worried, babe." And then an idea struck. "Professor, is there a treadmill in this place?" A few minutes later, the neurologist hooked up electrodes to my head. I stepped up on the platform of the treadmill. "Are you ready, Professor?" I asked. "This is insane," he said. "Well, can't hurt to give it a shot." Now remember, I'm going to go on running at a steady pace. I'm going to listen to some music, and I'll be blindfolded. We're going to keep it going like that for 10 minutes or so. Then, without any warning, stop the treadmill. I'll have to deal with the sudden shift in velocity. I'll be pulled out of automatic processing. I'll have to come home, and the treadmill starts whirring. My sneakers are connecting to the mat of the treadmill, clicking along, a somnambulant, reflexive cadence, a steady drumming. The music in the headphones is at 150 BPM. I breathe rhythmically. I focus on my stride, the autonomous swinging of my arms, the automatic recoil of my hamstrings, the feeling of flying laterally. My mind wanders. Will I like my life with Penny? Will I be happy with the results of my research position with Panarella? Do I like myself? Why did I take the fattening serum? Was it a mistake? Was it on purpose? Was there some reason I wanted to free my consciousness from my present awareness? Had I discovered something about existence that terrified me? I heard a sound like braking car tires, the skidding of rubber on rubber. I felt the traction of the treadmill jolt me forward. My hands reached out. The blindfold was pulled off. My eyes scanned, reaching for the handholds. And in a whoosh, I came back to myself. Or was it? It was me. The master had come to the door. Only the dog wasn't wagging his tail and looking up and licking his face. The dog was barking ferociously. As if an intruder had entered the home, Penny said, "Is it you, babe?" Professor Panarella looked up hopefully. "Harry, are you back?" I looked at these strangers. I looked down at my young body, and I looked at my vitals on the screen of the monitor. How long had I been in a coma? Where was that useless body being kept in this hospital, I thought? And who was Harry? All I knew is I was free. Free at last. Harry can't come to the phone right now, I thought with a chuckle. "What's so funny?" Penny says. "Oh, nothing," I say. "You wouldn't understand." The instructor. "Good morning. You may address me as instructor. Please take your seats," was written on the blackboard. A man in a white jumpsuit, adorned with medals, stood before the board, with his hands clasped behind his back, and watched the students file in. When they seemed ready, he began the class with a question. How many lives does an E-fighter have? Some have only one, you see. And that leads to the next question. How many lives do you have? If you do indeed have more than one, or several, or 9 lives, how will you live them? What will you want? Take some time to think about these answers. A few students raised their hands, but the instructor ignored them. He paced slowly in front of the classroom, looking them over as they deliberated the questions. 5 minutes ticked by to the sounds of 200 minds pondering the possibilities. a fidgety stillness. Anjo studied his desk to keep from catching the man's eye. Something about the instructor scared the bejesus out of him. "Time is up," the instructor continued. "If your answer is anything other than spending your lives destroying as many Titanians as possible before you die, you don't belong here. You are not a fighter, and you are free to leave." At least 20 men and women stood to line up at the exit. Anjo didn't dare move. Destroying countless Titanians wasn't quite his dream, but it was too late to change his mind. His family had been so proud of him for enlisting to fight. They'd given him a party. All his relatives came, his friends, neighbors. He carried their hope with him, the hope of things returning to normal, though everyone held their own version of what it meant. He couldn't leave. He wouldn't. When the light over the door changed from red to flashing white, robotic soldiers charged in from a door opposite the line and demolished the non-fighters. Anjo's screams were drowned out by the screams of others. His heart pounded against his chest, and fear, not blood, raced through his veins. Housekeeping robots glided in to remove the bodies and put the room back into its original state. "Did that sicken you?" the instructor shouted. "Innocent people just died for no reason. It happens every day in the life of a fighter. If that sickened you, I want you to line up against that wall." The instructor pointed to Anjo's right, opposite the wall to the exit door. Anjo lined up, knowing the penalty was death. But he didn't belong here. Surprisingly, others followed until only 50 or so remained in their seats. He tamped down hard on the disappointment he felt in himself. Anjo had come intending to do his best and to make himself into someone the world would remember. An asset to Earth. At least death would come quickly. The machine soldiers stormed into the room as expected, with their weapons drawn. To Anjo's horror, they annihilated the students who remained in their seats. And again, an army of cleaning robots arrived to remove the bodies, restoring the room to pristine condition. The instructor moved to stand before the now gibbering group in front of the wall. "Congratulations. You have made it through the first round. Rejoice, for you have earned the right to relax and enjoy the rest of the day. Training begins tomorrow." Anjo met Becca, standing in line at the cafeteria at dinner time. Short, dark hair, and only tall enough to reach his shoulder. He noticed her DT t-shirt. "Are you a Tiger fan?" he asked. "Oh yes. Baseball was the only sport to survive the times. The only thing allowed on television and radio. All the world over, people tuned in to watch their favorite teams play." Anjo's grandfather said he remembered when humans manned the bases. Now, artificial intelligence has taken on those roles. Still, each player came with a history and a life you could tune into whenever the team wasn't playing. It shook the world when Brad from the Angels got caught cheating on his wife, Lori, and she, in turn, divorced him. Now, he was drinking too much. Anjo's mother and sister were caught up in the drama much more than he, his brothers, or father. He smiled at the memory. Throughout the baseball games, automated spectators held up posters with messages for the world. Planet Earth has destroyed X number of Titanians. Our fighters are heroes. Earth is winning the war against Titan. Aju L0 Pilzwa sends greetings. Automated World Leader 12 was a surprise. AWL-11 had held the office for as long as Anjo could remember. He wondered what had happened, though the public would likely never learn. Long ago, when the planet was still divided into countries, 5 world powers came to understand that the planet they lived on was close to death, and so was the human race. With teams of engineers and scientists, they fed information into a super terminal AW-1, Automated World Influencer. The solutions from the AWI were studied, discussed, and put into place by the 5. Eventually, World Influencer was replaced with World Leader, planet Earth's very first. Basic needs, water, food, clothing, shelter, and medical help arrived to save the people. At the same time, incomes and living conditions were leveled. When the 5 granted AWIOG the reins of command, the Super AWI changed its name to Eidudu Azur, stepping into the role of a world leader. Exchange of world news was the first thing the leader eliminated, claiming sources couldn't be trusted. People reacted badly, and years of violent protests followed. Then the healing years came. Times were peaceful up until the Titanians invaded Earth and began the war. Armies of fighters were gathered and trained to fight. E-fighters, Earth fighters. The war brought the world together as one. However, without news, history was built on hearsay. One long-standing rumor claims biohazard waste, nuclear weapons, guns, and vials of germ warfare were sent into outer space, along with unhealthy pollutants. When something landed on Titan, a Saturn moon, the Titanians struck back. Another version claims the Titanians struck for no reason other than to destroy and conquer. By becoming a fighter, Anjo hoped to discover the truth and gain some understanding. But the class had rattled him to the core. Ideas surfaced that he didn't want to think about. Anjo and Becca took seats together at a common table. Others from their class joined them. Introductions were made as each new person sat. "Does anyone still have their taste buds?" asked a student introduced as Max. No one could taste, and everyone commiserated with each other as they picked at their food. Group spirit. The conversation turned to baseball, as conversations mostly always did. It's what people had in common all over the world, thought Anju. Then there came a lull. That happened too. Anjo smiled at Becca, looking for the courage to bring up a question. 15 seconds went by. Then, "What did you think about the orientation?" Max asked. "I think something's off about the instructor." "I agree," Anjo said at once. That was his thought, his question. He didn't ask it fast enough. Heads nodded all around the table. Camaraderie. "Should we tell someone? Who can we trust?" asked Becca. No one spoke the answer, but they all knew. They couldn't trust anyone. Did anyone notice the poster at the Astros game that said, "AWL012 sends his greetings"? Only half had noticed. I wonder what happened. "I heard something just before I came here," said Padina, a young woman in the seat next to Max. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "I heard the Titanians have already taken over Earth. They've captured and destroyed AWL011, and AWL012 is their creation." The conversation died as ideas and theories birthed and bred. "We'll keep our eyes and ears open," whispered Max. "And let's keep our mouths shut for now. We'll talk here again tomorrow." Does everyone agree? Everyone did. They placed their hands atop each other's and swore a pact. There were 12 in their pact. The instructor smiled as he watched them from a screen in his office. The next morning, Anjo put on the gray jumpsuit delivered to his sleep station during the night, along with his schedule. He was assigned to GRP 23. After breakfast, he was to report to Training Room C1. Becca was in Anjo's group. So was Max. In fact, all 12 in the pact were assigned to GRP 23. "Someone's been watching us," Max said. "Something's off. Keep on your toes." "My name is John Ross," a different instructor voiced. "You may address me as Lieutenant. In this class, you will learn to fly Juno 7000 destroyers using a simulator. By the end of 6 months, I expect perfection, or you'll find yourself cleaning latrines for the duration of your stay. Partner up." Anjo and Becca were partners. So were Max and Padina. 6 groups were here, GRP 23 through GR 28. Each group contained 12. The lieutenant told them that there were nearly 100 such groups at the NE Training Center. "GRP 25 and 28 stand with us," Max told everyone during dinner later in the week. "They're talking with 24 and 26. We are to gather in Group 27, feel them out, and see if they want to join us." Everyone I've spoken to says the same thing about the instructor. Nothing makes sense. In some of the induction classes, more than half the class was wiped out. GRP 28 feels Lieutenant Ross or Lindsay Franklin, the commander, might listen to us. They don't trust any of the others. Neither do I. Max found a note left near his bed the next morning. Watch signs at the Angels game tonight. Pact 23, as they called themselves, watched the game together and rooted for the Angels, though they were losing 12-0. Brad Adams, the first baseman, was clearly drunk and kept blowing kisses to his glamorous new girlfriend dressed in a low-cut top in the stands. He missed 3 easy catches and struck out twice. The crowd in the stands was shouting boos when suddenly a spectator stood with a sign. There are no Titanians. The sign was a lie. Of course, there are Titanians, though if they have control over AWSLSDU, then of course, that's what they'd say. The pact was arguing amongst themselves. What would be the purpose of them saying it? To throw us off, to cause dissent. It's working, said Anjo. The question is, who sent Max the message? Maybe I'll get another, said Max. Suddenly, Max looked to the ceiling. We need more proof, he shouted, while everyone else gave off a nervous laugh. Anjo shuddered. Tigers versus bears, and east versus west. The note was left for Carl, a fellow pact member. GRP 23 passed the word, and all 6 groups attended the 8 o'clock game. When the Tigers were ahead 5-3, a spectator held up a sign that read, "Thank you for your service. E-Fighters. Earth Fighters, East Fighters." During the next inning, a spectator from the opposite side of the field held up a sign that read, "Thank you for your service. W Fighters. World Fighters. West Fighters." Who were they? It's the same thing. Someone is trying to make us think there are no Titanians, and that all this time we've been at war with each other. East versus West. Well, that's a lie. The Titanians are why we are here. They're the reason for the creation of this training compound. The question is, who is leaving us these notes, telling us to watch these certain games? I think it's the instructor, Anjo put across. I think he's insane, but the messages on the signs are generated through the AI spectators, Max argued. Who controls them? Does the instructor have access? I think only the commander had access to the local terminal. Then how does he control the robots? Anju asked. Maybe that orientation class wasn't real, Padina brought out. Maybe it was all a simulation. I asked Commander Franklin how many fighters usually survive the first day's orientation, and she laughed. I don't think we've ever lost anyone, she told me. It was real, said Carl. A guy from my neighborhood, Jeb Whalen, was there during the orientation. We weren't friends, but we knew each other. He was the first to line up to leave. They killed him. If that was a simulation, why isn't he here? There was a lull in the arguments. When they started up again, everyone spoke quieter. We don't know why AWS011 was replaced by AWS012. That's when all the trouble started, Becca reminded everyone. And don't forget the rumor that the Titanians have already taken over. If they want us to believe they don't exist, then what? What will they do with us? What do they want? It's frightening in that it would be up to us to take the world back, said Padina. Can we do that? Who has access to the armory? We would need weapons, Max said. We don't know who has access to what, said Anjo. All we have are questions and rumors. We don't have enough information to act on anything. They were fighting amongst themselves again. People believed what they wanted. There were enough possibilities to create a myriad of scenarios encompassing both truths and lies. The easiest thing to accept was they were training to fight the Titanians. That's what Anjo chose, and he stuck to it regardless of what proof the others presented to him. He shouldn't have ever come here. He was having grave doubts about his abilities. While he knew he could kill Titanians, he closed his mind against the other possibilities. The NE compound training base was located in a remote area of Canada. Stars filled a dark sky. Titan wasn't visible. "Do you miss your family?" Becca asked Anjo as they strolled through the compound. Their breath steamed in front of them as they talked. "I can't believe how much," he answered. "You? I'd give anything to see them." They weren't allowed contact with the outside during their year of training. Their families would come to graduation at the end of the year. That was one of the rules they'd agreed to when they signed up. But whose rule was it? Titan's rule or Earth's rule? Anjo wanted to take Becca's hand, but that was another rule. If he broke it, the punishment would affect her as much as him. They were nearing the end. Graduation was a week away when Anjo found a note in his sleep station. The code for the armory is 234XSL7. He tried not to think about what this might mean. He wanted to keep it to himself, but he brought it to breakfast and passed it around his pack. It was meant to be shared with all of them. Anjo couldn't taste his breakfast. "Memorize it," said Max. "Then destroy it." Carl got the note last. He swallowed it. Anjo thought it wouldn't taste much different than the toast he tried to choke down. All students must report to Auditorium A at 0900 hours. Repeat. All students must report to Auditorium A at 0900 hours. The pact exchanged looks, but when the time came, they filed in like sheep and took their seats. The stage remained empty for 15 unbearable minutes. In the meantime, no one dared speak. But Anjo took Becca's hand. Whatever happened, they had this. Suddenly, the room darkened, and a spotlight shone on the stage. The instructor stepped out. "Good morning, students. Congratulations on your upcoming graduation. You have much to be proud of. Soon, your families will arrive, and I'm sure everyone is looking forward to their reunions. There is, however, one more test to determine your suitability to fight our enemy, the Titanians. Tomorrow, at 1200 hours, you will face off with your partner. 10 duos at a time. Hand-to-hand combat to the death. Only the worthy shall prevail. Get your rest now, and make no mistake, you will need every bit of your strength to get through tomorrow. These orders come directly from AWL-2. That is all. You are excused. The instructor left the stage, went to his office, and stood before the screen. He was smiling as he watched the mass of students march to the armory. Max was leading. So was Anjo. Leaders are made. Who had said that? But at last, an uprising, a rebellion, long in coming. The AWLs had gained entirely too much power over the decades. It was AWL0 and 10 who'd first decided humans weren't happy unless they were at war. War was then added as a basic need. The Titan attack was fabricated. It had taken years to penetrate the codes in the super terminal. The first breakthrough for the resistance. After that, they began using the baseball spectators to communicate. When AWL-011 caught on, it recoded itself into AWL-012 for protection. But it was already too late by then. Right now, all over the world, training centers and fighter bases were uprising to destroy the terminals that would, in turn, immobilize the AWL system. Earth would belong to the humans again. Of course, sacrifices had to be made along the way. How else could anyone turn complacency into rage? They pounded and struck the office door until they broke through. The instructor stood to face them with his hands behind his back. Feast. It's 2 a.m. Cassie's mournful dirge drifts up from the pantry. I lie in bed, staring at the moonlight through the open window, exhausted from the absence of sleep, pondering whether tonight is the night I start to set boundaries, feign ignorance to my daughter's call for attention, or go downstairs to take care of her needs, as I have done every night since she died. The illuminated hands of the clock read 2:30 a.m. by the time she falls silent. For a moment, hope offers me its hand. Has the torment finally ended? Is peace now mine? A drumbeat pounds in my ears. Nerves fire off insurgent tension, and 2:45 a.m. is the time I begin to believe she has quietened for the night. I close my eyes, breathe in, breathe out. Unfamiliar calm trickles in. At the point sleep beckons, a sudden thunder crash of rage shakes my bed, and I hear Cassie howl like a banshee. Hope withdrawn, I throw off the duvet, slide my feet into cold slippers, and head downstairs on a silent prayer for Cassie to be gone by the time I open the pantry door. But she's there, on top of the refrigerator, like a mound of meringue, all folds and as white as freshly fallen snow. The silver heart charm that dangled from her wrist in life still in place. Her shadowy eyes are red, and swollen. Her pudgy hands reach out to grasp the air. "About time," she wails, a repeat of what she says to me every night. I sigh, rub my sore eyes. "Sorry, sweetie. I was trying to sleep. It's almost 3 a.m. You do realize that?" A flash of times past when Cassie, a toddler, would creep into my room in the early hours to tell me she had been calling out for help in the bathroom, and would I come with her right now, because she really needed to go. Me chastising her as I chastise her now. I shrug. Then again, you're a spirit, so maybe you don't. A moan bubbles, bursts up from her insides. The pitch is ear-splitting. I am forced to cover my ears. "Do you realize how long I've been waiting?" she says. "Are you trying to starve me all over again?" She drags out the word starve. It stokes my guilt, and in my exhaustion, I want to laugh hysterically. I open the fridge door, bury the sarcastic smile playing on my lips amidst the piles of food on the shelves. Cream-filled pastries, trifles, cooked sausages, and bacon. Chocolate muffins topped with swirly icing domes. A foodie's paradise. But the sight makes me balk. Food dominated Cassie's 19-year lifespan. Mine, too. I cannot believe it dominates her in death. What would you like, Cassie? There's lots to choose from. How about, before I can finish, her yelling bounces off the pantry walls. Anything. Just give me anything. I need to feed, and you're frittering away precious time asking me what I'd like. I take out the plate of sausages. In those first few weeks, she showed up. I took the time to place them in a bread roll, slather on ketchup and mustard to make it look appealing. I don't bother with the presentation now. Instead, I throw them into her open mouth as if I'm feeding a ravenous, feral dog. She doesn't chew. I'm not sure ghosts have the ability, but gulps them down in an instant. I see them slip through her transparent, organ-free form. It's like watching a medical scan in real time. They leave her as they went in. Whole, unchewed, undigested, splatting to the floor. I follow with the cakes and trifles. Watch my spirit daughter gorge only to cry for more. I take the dustpan and brush, sweep up the mess, pour it back into her, and this is the cycle, pending her being satiated enough to cease her demands. Once the cycle stops and Cassie is soothed, I'll clean up, throw it all in the bin. It'll be far too mushy by then to save. Besides, it soon stinks the place out. Then I'll sit a while, talk to her about anything and nothing, until those shadowy eyes of hers close and she falls silent for the rest of the night. I share some blame for Cassie's current state and for how her life turned out. Weighing in at a hefty 13 pounds after a pregnancy sustained purely by chocolate bars, the only food my constantly nauseous stomach wouldn't eject. Cassie suckled the entire first night. Such was her voracious demands, until I was too sore for her to touch me. A bout of mastitis sealed the deal to move her onto bottle feeds. "We'll see if she's meant to be this big," the health visitor said. "You're only a small build, so maybe she'll slow down." Cassie did slow down, but I wasn't worried. Children grow at different paces. She possessed a healthy appetite, cleaning every morsel from her plate, and more. An active child, she remained slim, but followed her centiles, a term used by health professionals. Listening to the mothers at the school gates, fraught with their fussy eaters, I admit to feeling smug. Then, one day, karma bit me for my arrogance. Cassie stopped eating. Her personality changed. She was having trouble with her friends, bullying, her teachers said. A phase, I thought. But after 6 months, it dawned that this was no phase. Something far more serious was at play. Cassie is 10 years old and weighs what a child half her age should weigh. How long has she been experiencing problems with food? The doctor gazed at me with sympathetic eyes as he spoke. I was grateful for it. It made a change from the critical glances I had become used to. I took Cassie's hand, gave it a reassuring squeeze. She pulled away, a fierce scowl that said, "You are a lying bitch," came my way. She had gone through the surgery door under false pretense, that of holiday vaccines, to go somewhere exotic. I had said it with my face set in stone, so she didn't suspect. I risked paying a heavy price for inventing such a whopper. But by then, I'd have done and said anything if it meant getting Cassie help. Since summer, so 6 or 7 months maybe, I replied. She didn't like the way she looked in her swimsuit, said her thighs were too wobbly to be on show. I thought it would pass, only it hasn't. It's getting worse. I've been called to collect her from school several times because she's fainted. She gets breathless at the slightest exertion. Her bones jut out. She's pale and sleeps a lot. I'm really worried about her. I wanted to say I feared she'd die, but to say it could make it happen. So I kept it to myself. There's a risk of lifelong health problems if she doesn't start gaining weight. The doctor looked to Cassie. "Do you understand what is happening here, Cassie? You are very thin, and it's not good for you." Cassie stared at the floor, her arms crossed over her chest. The doctor sighed. "Let's see what help we can get for you, shall we?" We left the surgery. A prescription for supplementary feeds, iron pills, and vitamins stuffed in my pocket. A referral to child psychiatry on its way. Cassie sulked all the way home, shut herself away for several days without uttering a word to me. When she did finally show, her rage had stepped up a notch. How dare you tell the doctor that I don't eat, Mum?" she yelled. "It is my business, not yours and not his." She stood in the middle of the kitchen, arms flailing, her tinny ribs visible beneath one of the close-fitting tops she insisted on wearing to display what she saw as a model figure. Cassie's glare cut me. I felt like the devil reincarnated. "You need help, sweetie. I've tried to do this on my own, but I'm lost now. I don't know what to do anymore. You're wasting away. I can't stand to see you like this." "Then don't look at me." Hands on hips, head thrust forward, a wild glint in her eyes. "Cassie, please don't. I only want to help, so shut up and leave me alone." She stomped off to her room. At the top of the stairs, she called out, "And just so you know, I will not see a doctor ever again." The door at the bottom of the stairs opened. As Cassie paced towards the kitchen, I was quick to hide the bottle labeled sugar-free lemonade I had refilled with a sugar-loaded version inside the refrigerator. Cassie was 15 at the time, skeletal, walking miles every day and night. She appeared in the kitchen door, layered up in clothing, a scarf and woolly hat. Despite the heating being cranked so high, I could barely breathe. "It's cold outside. They've forecast rain, too," I said. "Why don't we watch a film? I've bought some of that toffee popcorn and hazelnut chocolate you've always liked." Gray rings circled her eyes. Angry red spots shone from her cheeks. "Maybe later," she said, and turned to leave. "Be back by 1. It's clinic today. Don't forget." The front door slammed behind her. Despite her lack of response, I knew Cassie would return home in time for her weekly appointment. She had signed an agreement with the medics, one I knew she would not default on. In exchange for doctors pausing her forced admission to hospital, she would eat a little more, show up at the clinic every Friday to be weighed, have her bloods checked. We drove to the clinic that afternoon, Cassie staring out of her side window, me humming along to the radio. The sun had broken through the clouds, turning a gray day beautiful. Inside the clinic, Cassie disappeared with the nurse, only to return several moments later, an ecstatic grin on the nurse's face. "She's put on a whole kilogram since last week," the nurse announced. A glimmer of light shone. I began to see faith in that pivotal moment. Yet my faith would soon be shattered. The next morning, as laundry tossed in the washing machine, I heard a knock-knock coming from inside. I found nothing obvious when I emptied the machine, but when checking through the clothing, I felt small, hard lumps in the hems of Cassie's trousers, in the lining of the jacket she had worn the day previous, childlike stitching on the inner side. I picked it open. Pebbles fell on the floor. "You should have put her in the psychiatric hospital when you had the chance. They'd have sorted her out. They're the professionals, not you." Having chided me throughout this challenging time, my mother's unwanted advice didn't come as a surprise. "Cassie doesn't want to be in hospital, Mum." And I couldn't bear to think of her being force-fed And that's what would happen. It would be purgatory for her. I'm sure she'd do something drastic, so she dies either way, choking back tears. My feet barely touched the floor as I left the house, car keys in hand. I sped off down the road, not knowing where I was headed. I didn't return home for another 3 months. I woke from the induced coma 3 weeks after the car accident. Extensive surgical repairs to my left leg, from thigh to ankle, meant weeks of rehab and learning to walk again. By the time I returned home, Cassie had a slight prominence to her tummy, a rounder face, but she seemed downbeat, soulless. There, you see? My mother proudly paraded a plumper Cassie before me. This is what happens when you set boundaries for your children and don't allow them to control you. I took Cassie's hands. You look amazing, sweetie. So pretty. We hugged. I felt the meat on her bones, the warmth of her. She forced a smile, although darkness sat in her eyes. For the remainder of my mother's stay, I watched Cassie shovel her grandmother's meals into her mouth, mindless, not seeming to taste or enjoy what was going in. She tried to throw it all back up again when I first arrived, didn't you, dear? But I put a stop to that too, my mother announced. Cassie nodded. She didn't look up, said nothing, kept on like a robot, loading her fork, filling her mouth, swallowing. I should have been happy she was eating. I wasn't. When I asked, neither Cassie nor my mother would elaborate on what went on between them during my absence. Cassie would shrug, remain tight-lipped. My mother would smile and say, "Proper parenting, dear." Only at Cassie's wake, 4 years later, did my mother offer her pious explanation. I broker her. That's what happened. I removed everything she liked. Her music, the TV, those awful childish coloring books you insisted on buying for her. I locked her inside the house so she couldn't exercise. I put a spoon to her mouth every damn meal until she caved and started to eat. No food, no reward. When she fought against me, I slapped her every minute of every day for the entire 3 months, never out of my sight. That's all it took to get Cassie back again. It's what you should have done, but no, you had to give in to her again. Now look where she is. She turned to look at Cassie's photograph on the mantel. Then she was gone. You didn't like me when I was thin. You don't like me now I'm fat, do you? Cassie asks. I sit opposite Cassie's ghost on a chair I've dragged from the dining room. I haven't yet cleaned up the food mess from the floor. I stare into the myriad colors and textures. I've always loved you, Cassie. I worried about you when you were too thin. It didn't mean I disliked you. The saucepan flying through the air, the bolognese within it spraying across the kitchen cabinets, plates smashed against the floor tiles in my desperation to see her eat. Never have I revealed this to Cassie, but these were the times I disliked her the most. I used to think you were a useless mother. Misery and wrath cross Cassie's face like a hologram changes when it is turned. Do you still think that? I ask. You didn't understand me. You were afraid to. Cassie's eyes meet mine. I see the depth of her melancholy. An infinite, darkened pool. She is distant, forever out of reach, as she always was. Yet I failed to see it. Failed to see why. A lump comes to my throat. I cannot swallow it down. I grab the dustpan and brush to clear away the debris from the floor. Next comes the mop, swishing back and forth until the dirty patch shines. Throughout, Cassie is silent, watching me work. Eventually, she breaks the peace. Do you miss me? I lean on the mop handle. I miss you dreadfully, Cassie. I just wish our time together had been different, happier, less of a fight, squeezing out the water from the mop. I wonder why Cassie's ghost did not return with the appearance she bore when she died. Emaciated, barely there. Was her ghostly bulk meant to taunt me? As if she reads my mind, she says, "You were only happy when I ate, when I was bigger." So she comes here looking like this because she thinks it's how I prefer to see her. I drop my head to hide the brimming tears. It doesn't make me happy to see you like this, to see you so sad. Not back then, and certainly not now. The tremble in my bones reverberates in my voice. Cassie judders. Her mountainous bulk ripples. Her face crumples as the wailing kicks in. The mop drops from my hand, and I move to take her in my arms, stopping in my tracks when I realize I cannot touch her, cannot feel her. It's okay, sweetie. You don't have to do this. Believe me, I'd rather you rest. Her crying fades out like the end of a song. She becomes still. You don't wish to see me again? Her question is but a whisper. I would give anything to see you again, but not like this, and not if it causes you pain. For the first time since she started showing up here, I see her spirit smile. 5 a.m. The night after, and the dusky sky is littered with glistening dots. A chill seeps in through the open window. I shudder, get up to close the window, and with the click of its handle, my sleepy brain registers that I have not been stirred to the sound of Cassie's dirge. I listen for her cries. Nothing except silence fills the house. I should climb into bed, thankful for the peace. Instead, I creep downstairs, each step tentative, not wanting to rouse her or set off her wailing. The pantry door opens with a creak. I step inside. Cassie is gone, but for her heart charm bracelet lying on the top of the refrigerator. I pick up the bracelet, place it around my wrist, feel her presence against my skin. It tells me she will not return here, that her haunting is done. I take the stairs, crawl into my bed. Instantly, I fall asleep, Cassie's heart charm gripped between my fingertips.